So instead of talking about the other marijuana bill, you want to talk about campaign finance?
Yes.
Okay, well, have at it.
And again, it's going to come back to marijuana again.
Mm-hmm.
But here's why I consider campaign finance reform the most important issue in America.
Okay.
When's the last time you looked at the approval rating of Congress?
It's generally pretty low, and I think sometimes it's deserved and sometimes it's not.
14%?
Mm-hmm.
18%?
Yeah.
That means at least 4 out of 5 people disapprove of Congress.
Mm-hmm.
Why?
Well, maybe I think it's partly a tidal wave effect where people have gotten this mentality of they all stink, so get rid of all of them.
Why don't we trust our congressmen?
I guess it's because we know that there's money involved somewhere in there.
Everybody in America knows that our congressmen and our senators are controlled by special interest money,
mm-hmm.
and they vote the way the guys who write the big checks want them to vote. And that's what we have right now. Not a country where our senator represents you and me, but our senator represents the insurance company that's given him $9 million over the last 18 years. And he won't be with us for much longer. But that's why he stood up and said, I will filibuster the public option. I don't care how many people in my state want Medicare for everybody. So here's what happens.
Go ahead, yeah.
We've gotten to a point in this country where special interests vote our laws. And we are at the effect. And that's why nobody trusts Congress. Nor should they. That will only change with public financing. Excuse me.
Okay, I'm going to take you in a little bit of a segue here, because here in Connecticut, we've had public financing for since about 2008. So it's gone through the ringer on a few elections now.
No. Linda McMahon spent her own money to run against Dick Blumenthal. Mm-hmm. That was not public money. That was private money. I'm talking about publicly financed elections.
Okay. Yeah.
Every candidate, including the incumbent, has exactly the same amount of money to run with, not a penny more.
Okay, now for state offices,
how you spend it is up to you.
Well, for state offices, that's a little closer to how it's done in Connecticut. I understand federal offices, representatives and senators are stuck with they're stuck with the system that rewards greed and rewards representatives and senators according to how much money they get from lobbyists and from wealthy people. You're going to need to take your thing and just slide it back up there. A little wardrobe malfunction, no big deal.
No nipple, though.
Where are you, Janet Jackson, when we need you? So at any rate, but here in Connecticut, for local, not local, but statewide offices, senators, representatives, governor, we have what I think is a pretty fair system in place, and hopefully it'll survive the budget crisis, because I think it's money well invested in order to keep our folks, less under the control of lobbyists.
It's less of an issue in state government.
Yeah.
Because the amounts of money, taxpayer money, are not as large.
No.
So what I'm saying is this, and a good example is marijuana.
Yeah.
Marijuana is illegal, even though most people in this country feel that it should not be a criminal matter. Most people in this country approve and are very, very favorable toward medical marijuana for people with serious illnesses.
As are apparently most of the people in Connecticut.
And a growing number of people in this country are in favor of outright legalization and commercialization, such that farmers have a new crop, the clothing industry has new material, the paper industry has new sources that don't require cutting down our forests, and stores and pharmacies have new merchandise that is in demand.
Thank you, Garcon.
Thank you. Now, we talked about the groups that are aligned against marijuana. So even though a majority of Americans don't want it to be criminal, want people to have it medically, it's still illegal after 74 years. Why? Because those lobbies, cotton, lumber, and the pharmaceutical industry, have given large amounts of money to the chairman and co-chairman and ranking members of all the committees that would review this legislation and pass it on for a vote and a change in the laws nationally. So it will never get anywhere because the people in Congress who could move that legislation along, the key people have been paid large amounts of money to kill it. It will take a large outcry from a very large number of the American people to get rid of the prohibition and to make this a crop that everyone can benefit by. And here's the key fact that everyone needs to know. In the states that have decriminalized, all of which have also now approved medical marijuana.
Which states are those?
And Connecticut will be the 17th
California is
state.
the biggest one.
Connecticut will be the 17th
So there are 16 states already.
16 states already. Connecticut will be the 17th. They've done studies now. No evidence of any increase in usage in any age group in those states. None. And that was a big fear of people like Senator Boucher. That, oh, now everybody's going to do it if it's legal. No. In fact, there's evidence that usage has gone down.
I hope she's not fearful that she would end up be tempted to use it.
I will reserve comment.
I'll have to give her a call and ask her. Maybe she's got a little concern about her own.
It couldn't hurt.
Her own ability to just say no.
Again, I know no one who uses marijuana who recommends people to use marijuana or advocates for it. No. People choose it. Adults choose it. Kids too, and that's another issue. And
Sure,
I am not in favor of kids using anything, alcohol, tobacco, or any drug before 18 years old, if ever.
Even the drug lobby is, for whatever reason, is pretty clear about cutoff ages for the use of prescription drugs.
Yes.
Not suitable.
Well, the FDA requires them
developmental
to specify
stages.
what ages it is not appropriate for.
Yeah.
Or if it's only appropriate for adults and it's approved on that basis. But marijuana is a good example of how things that are actually popular in America, like Medicare for everybody, don't get put into law. Because the people who are elected to respond to the will of the people, unfortunately, are only responding to the will of the people in their little district who reelects them, who very often have one point of view because of the way those districts have been gerrymandered. And again, all of that happens because special interests call the shots that require redistricting so that certain people continue to be elected because there's no opposition in their district, and whoever the Republican or Democrat is.
Joe at the next table wants to know, he doesn't understand what gerrymandering is. Would you mind explaining what that is?
Gerrymandering is a procedure that happens in every state after a census is taken.
Yeah.
The following year, a study is made of where people have moved and where the population has grown or shrunk in a given area in that state. The voting districts are then redrawn, and they're supposed to be drawn in an objective way that is based on demographics in a factual, sensible format. But here's what happens because of our political system.
So hypothetically, in a state, you would have a big state. Let's say a big state. You'd have districts that are essentially round or square or something fairly close.
A shape that seems to make some sense.
Rather than something that starts from here and zigzags here.
And looks like an Etch-a-Sketch that got left on the doctor's office table from a kid who never finished it. Some of the districts, if you look at some of their local districts in Connecticut, both senatorial and the House of Representatives in Connecticut, you will see shapes that cannot be described on a jigsaw puzzle. This happens so that people who are in power can continue to stay in power without having to respond to any other point of view than the one they already hold and that the majority of their constituents already hold. This is a practice that will continue until people say no more, which they did in Colorado a few years ago.
Well, Joe at the next table says, stick with this healthcare stuff. He's enjoying the conversation over here about healthcare. We talked a little bit about the cost of marijuana as opposed to, and some of the things that it might replace and how it would benefit in terms of cost to the taxpayer.
Absolutely.
And a lot of things come back to, we're in a crunch time for spending taxpayer dollars.
Yes.
So we'd like our government to be able to spend less money
Yes.
and provide better services for less money.
Yes. And included in that is no longer overpaying the pharmaceutical companies through Medicare. Whatever price they require the federal government to pay, again, because of the 2003 Nancy Johnson Medicare Improvement Act.
Oh, what a headache. What a headache that was.
Which, in addition, because it was unfunded, has taken $800 billion out of the U.S. Treasury and handed it directly to the pharma lobby through the pricing that they were able to just simply impose.
Unfunded mandates. We hear a lot about unfunded mandates, and that was one of the great ones, along with a couple of wars that we don't seem to know how to pay for, except all of a sudden one day we wake up and we say, oh my God, we ran out of money.
But of course,
better push a bill through real quick to fund it.
The cost of all of that is now Obama's fault. Let's not forget that the cost of all those wars and the tax break, which to the wealthiest, which cost another $1 trillion or more dollars. But that's all Barack now, because after all, he's been there just over 2 years.
Yeah. Well, back to the Medicare Part B, which our representative Nancy Johnson, who graciously was sent packing finally.
Thank you, Chris Murphy.
In 2006, her bill. And she was one of the leaders in putting this bill through.
She was the chairwoman of the subcommittee on appropriations that wrote that legislation with the pharma lobby.
And it was designed to cost taxpayers $1 trillion over a 10-year period.
Correct.
Essentially in excess profits for the pharmaceutical industry. Not profits. Excess guaranteed excess profits.
Oh, they were doing just fine in 2003. But they were so happy when this law got passed that the very day after it was passed, House Speaker Hastert,
Dennis Hastert, yep,
and Majority Leader in the Senate, Tom DeLay, closed the House and Senate at 5 o'clock sharp so that they could attend a banquet by the pharma lobby where they handed the Republican National Committee a check for $30 million as a reward for passing the pharmaceutical bill as part of the Medicare.
Another point of that I think is important to note is that was another bill that they have a certain amount of time to cast their votes within the halls of Congress. There's a time frame to cast their vote, and that particular bill was the vote was held over for 6 additional hours, while a fellow by the name of Walter Jones from North Carolina, Republican, pretty good guy, pretty much a libertarian in nature, who had said he would never, ever, ever, he would be in his grave before he would ever support that bill. And the angels of pharma came down upon him and somehow got him to flip his vote to yay, and he was the deciding vote at, I believe it was 2 o'clock in the morning.
It was actually almost 6 o'clock in the morning.
Okay, so we'll give him a little
and I stayed up for every minute and watched it on C-SPAN. That was a 15-minute vote that went on for 5 hours and 53 minutes.
Well, they got that last guy that they needed to pass that bill.
When Dick Cheney was a member of Congress and the Democrats held a vote over an extra 20 minutes, Dick Cheney called it the worst violation of parliamentary procedure in the history of the U.S. Congress.
And probably
20 minutes.
And probably called the pharma vote
the thing is,
the best thing that ever happened.
He wasn't wrong. 20 minutes was inexcusable. But that was 20 minutes, not 5 hours and 40 minutes.
Yeah, that's...
That was the most unbelievable experience. It took them 5.5 hours to get a few votes turned around of what clearly was a no vote at the end of 15 minutes, and at the end of a half hour, and at the end of 1 hour, and 2 hours, and 3 hours, and 4 hours. But somehow at 5 hours and 53 minutes, it became 218 to 217 for a yes.
And that bill also created what became famously known as the donut hole, where our seniors, after a certain amount, I think it's after $3,000, you get this gap of it's pretty sizable gap.
They have to make up a big chunk of the difference until they've laid out several more $1,000s out of pocket, and then the government comes back in.
Yeah.
And that was all to save the health insurance companies money. So, again, most people in this country, if they could have Medicare...
One more thing. Another thing about it that I remember, which was quite egregious, was the fact that it made it illegal. Many, many seniors would hop on a bus, go across the border to Canada, because in Canada, the Canadians won't put up with the pharmaceutical cost, incredibly cost, high-priced drugs.
Well, they negotiate with the pharmaceutical companies in Canada.
Yeah, to get the price down.
Interesting concept, negotiating for the price.
Americans were going across the border, buying their pharmaceuticals in Canada, in order to save a huge amount of money. That became illegal under this bill.
I did too during a time when I was uncovered for a medication I needed and here would have had to buy it from the pharmacy retail. I was able to buy it from Canada, and including shipping was about 60% of the cost that it would have been here. And interestingly enough, Canada has tighter regulations controlling their pharmacies and pharmaceutical distributors than America does. So the idea that, hey, we got to be careful with these drugs from Canada because we don't know their standards are higher than American. So I don't think we had to worry about Canadian medicine.
Oh, those crazy socialized medicine Canadians.
And in fact, I know people in Canada who are very happy with Canadian health care. And
Generally,
they said, look, unless you want to get a facelift or a nip and tuck, that we don't do up here. You got to go down to it. You got to spend the bucks and down in America for that. But hey, you know, you got a broken leg, we set them just fine up here, just like they do down there, and you don't have to wait for it, eh?
And I've had people on the show from many countries that unsolicited comment was that in those other countries, health care is far superior. Plus, you don't have to fill out paperwork. The doctors love it, too.
We are the only country in the industrialized world that does not have health care for everybody, that doesn't consider it a universal right for every citizen. The only country in the world, industrialized country, that does not have health care for everybody. What does that tell us? Who are we really?
Either they're all wrong, either the rest of the world is wrong, damn them all, or we're the only ones that are right.
Well, you know, the Republicans like to talk about Obamacare. I like to talk about Ryan Care. You know, if you have Ryan Care, you're on your own, pal. Stay healthy.
Yeah.
And when you do get really sick, you might want to think about putting it into it quickly because the money's not going to be there to take care of you with a long-term disability.
All well and good, except for under Ryan's perception of suicide is probably that damn you if you commit suicide.
Right. Meanwhile, we now know that the real definition of suicide is the Republican agenda.
Oh. Although, I have to say this, that there are a lot of corporate Democrats.
Yes, there are.
And we'll call them enablers. Maybe they're not. Maybe they're not. Maybe they're the last ones, the last rats on the ship.
Right.
But they're still rats.
Well, one of the things that's interesting in America is we have yet to fully admit to ourselves and each other openly that we are a left-of-center country. We are a left-of-center country, but people hate to admit it because they think it makes them look soft or a little too sensitive, maybe. But we are a left-of-center country. Look at what's on television. We're a left-of-center country.
Oh, in terms of violence?
We accept homosexuality.
In terms of silent violence
we
and
have
sex?
we have fun with the gay characters on television. Nobody's screaming you have to take the show off the air. There's a gay character. We accept so much in this culture. We accept marijuana use. It's a joke in most places. We accept infidelity in marriage. It's a joke in a lot of places. This is a left-of-center country. Hollywood has free reign to make any kind of movie, stuff that would never be shown in a strictly centrist country.
Here's an observation, and I want you to comment on it. Over the years, since Fox became a national network, and a cable network too, I would have to say that the shows that are on Fox tend to be more, some of them are incredibly bawdy, incredibly
How about violent, too?
Raucous. Well, never mind violence. Violence is something that I think people. I don't accept it. A lot of people do.
But think about the Fox viewer.
Yeah, but shows like The Simpsons.
Yes.
Shows like that they've had over the years, like Married with Children. Some really.
Hey, let's not forget some great shows like 24. Fox has done some great things with television. House.
Really.
Fox has some great. Fox understands entertainment.
I didn't like 24. I thought that was
now. See,
too frightening.
I found 24 absolutely absorbing, one of the best and most revolutionary TV series ever because it changed the pacing of a TV drama from forever forward.
Yeah.
Now the hour-to-hour reality and the day-to-day part of the program is really a fundamental part of a lot of programming and dramatic series now. Especially, you'll see it on AMC, the way they use.
I thought of it as being a way to frighten people.
Violent as can be.
Yeah, frighten people into
the people who watch Fox are conservative,
supporting some crazy activities by
as a rule
by right-wing politicians and the government acting in wars and torturing people.
But it was all. It may have been exaggerated, but it was all essentially true. But yes, it was violent and stark and harsh and unpleasant and also very well written, very well acted, very well directed, and entertaining in the way of an adventure story or an adventure movie that's just fun and it doesn't mean a thing.
Joe says back to healthcare, please.
Okay.
Okay, Joe.
Back to healthcare.
Back to healthcare.
The majority of people in this country want to be able to buy Medicare.
Mm-hmm.
The people who don't want them to have it are the people who receive money from the insurance industry, because the insurance industry is going to start losing profits as soon as people can choose Medicare, which they will.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why they're going to continue to raise rates at every opportunity.
Why Medicare, though? Is Medicare more cost efficient?
Yes, Medicare is more cost efficient.
Why? How?
Medicare is more cost efficient because there is no profit motive built into the system.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't have the large number of high-paid executives that you have in a private company who are all collecting large salaries, but not necessarily all that important. They may be in the advertising part of that insurance company. Medicare doesn't need to advertise.
Mm-hmm. People
who have Medicare love it. Myself included. I'm covered by Medicare for 80% of everything I need.
I think most seniors would probably...
and that's where the Republicans miscalculated hugely. Mm-hmm. They forgot that their own constituents, Republican though they may be, who have Medicare, love Medicare and don't mess with it. Medicare is extremely popular because it does not have a bunch of bloated salaries. Mm-hmm. It's not trying to deny coverage based on its profit margins. Whereas when you need an unusual procedure from a health insurance company and you have a policy that should give that to you, but they stall, deny, or challenge.
Try to find any way to deny you coverage for that.
Because they lose profit and they're responsive to their shareholders. Mm-hmm. In my opinion, and I've looked at this issue all my life, I consider medicine for profit immoral by its very definition. Inherently evil. To make someone's health dependent on what you can get from him in return for aiding him in restoring or continuing his health, and making it a matter of not giving him that assistance until you extract what you say you want in material reward for that. That to me is the absolute wrong way to do medicine from a healing standpoint.
It has to be tough on the people that work for the pharmaceutical companies and the HMOs to have to sit in a cubicle all day and know in their heart that they're getting paid based on, and in many cases getting bonuses based on their ability to deny important health care coverage to the contract holders of
But they don't think of it that way. They're loyal to their employers, and their employers say, look, we're not giving the store away. If they really, really need it, and they won't leave it alone, and they won't stop with us, they're going to get it eventually. But this way, we're going to discourage all the people who aren't willing to go all the way down the line, because some of them will just give up. And they know that.
But giving up quite often means death.
Gee, it's an unfortunate side effect of the strategy. But again, they're not concerned with the people who die waiting to get a procedure approved. They're not concerned. The insurance industry to this day is the only industry in the entire country that is exempt from antitrust laws. Every other industry in this country operates with antitrust laws that prevent different companies from colluding on price or agreeing on data to justify certain pricing structures so that none is really competing with the other. But the insurance industries are allowed to do that by law and prevented from being taken away from them by law.
That's a very uncomfortable thought.
Now, Teddy Roosevelt was adamantly opposed to this. He was successful in the antitrust legislation that we do have started with Teddy Roosevelt when he saw the abuses of the robber barons of the 1880s and 1890s and the way they manipulated competition between companies to form monopolies. The insurance industry is essentially a monopoly under many different names, and having studied for a while to be an actuary, the game really comes down to taking the raw data and manipulating it in such a way as to justify a rate that is way above what the rate really should be, but you can do it with numbers.
Okay. Historical reference. I just want to add a little something for the audience about historical reference to what a monopoly is. There are two types of monopolies. There's a horizontal monopoly where, for instance, ExxonMobil controlled all the oil.
Yes.
Vertical monopoly is where one company owns the oil from the well to the pump. So there's no breaks in the action along the way.
Kind of what Bell Telephone used to have with local and long distance.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
What I'm talking about when I say a monopoly, I mean essentially all of the different oil companies functioning as one company when it comes to pricing. For instance, one of the reasons gasoline is at $4 a gallon is because there is no more gasoline that can be refined in America right now. There are no more refineries. And the ones that are in operation, which are 30, 20, 30, 40 years old, are running 24 hours a day. So even if there was more oil, they can't make more gasoline than they're making right now. Not possible.
It'd probably be cost prohibitive to
they're at 100% production.
To refine it elsewhere and bring it into the country.
Well, to build new refineries, but they have no incentive to build new refineries because then they lose an excuse for keeping the price at $4 a gallon because they can only turn out so much gas. And we're using more and more. So they build in all the rationalizations, and now we come back to the subsidies that the oil companies are demanding the American taxpayers give them after the 5 largest oil companies just made $39 billion in just the first quarter. They want another $4 billion of U.S. taxpayer money in this economy. For what? For what?
I guess because they want it.
Because $39 billion is not enough. 43 looks better. And they're looking at that extra $4 billion. That's play money to them. Those are bonuses. Those are a nice little house in St. Croix or a month on St. John. That's a new Gulf Star. That $4 billion can make a lot of people in the business very happy. They want that $4 billion of our money. It's not enough that they're getting us for $4 a gallon at the pump. And how much is heating oil now? Got to be close to the same price, right?
They generally run pretty concurrent with one another.
Thank God heating season is over.
Well, here's the overriding question to that. Because we have to look inside the minds of people who are making decisions that bring them incredible wealth at the expense of the American public, the American taxpayer, their fellow citizens.
I'm going to say something about that.
How can their minds
I'm going to tell you and
work through this in a moral sense? Because we're talking about morals.
Here's how I learned this, and I'll tell you how I learned it. I was a public school kid who got a scholarship to a prep school in 9th grade. All of a sudden, I went from a big public school in the city to a little prep school where my entire graduating class was 43 students. All of whom had been together since preschool, went to the same high Episcopalian church, belonged to the same country club and swim club, and I was the outsider. But here's what I learned, and these boys were very much like George and Jeb Bush, born with trust funds, old family money that goes back at least 2 or 3 generations, if not 5 or 10 generations. Family houses like the Kennebunkport and family homes that have been in the family for 5 generations. Old big stone houses that used to have maids and servants and carriages and stables and all that. And what I learned as I got to know these boys from this totally different background from mine was this. They see their mission in life as they become a man is to take their part in the family business, and when they become the alpha male of the family, to manipulate the family.
I think we're going to have to call that entitled, perhaps, is the word we're looking for. And with that, we're going to have to cut it off. It's Progressive Soup. David Stevenson, Soup.Curt Rayvis, another great conversation. Have you back for another time.
Thanks, Dave.
Good night.